Hi everyone, this is Just a Mom with Just the Facts. Thanks for joining me as I walk through a presentation on gun control. The purpose of creating this YouTube channel grew from my belief that the media, talk shows on the radio and online are becoming ever increasingly biased, pushing their hidden agenda forward and demonizing anyone who sees a position differently. This is leaving Americans confused, frustrated, and even causing decent people to turn on one another. I don't believe that Americans who disagree with my position are evil, but I do believe that there are a few with great power who want us to believe otherwise, and I simply have had enough. During this presentation and all the ones I do in the future, my goal is to remain as unbiased as possible. I simply want to present the facts from as many unbiased sources as I can, so we as parents can start making informed, educated decisions on these issues that affect our lives now and the lives of our children in the future. As I present my findings on this very touchy subject, I ask that you remain open-minded and willing to hear out both sides. If you hear something that may question your current beliefs, please don't let your subjective bias shut down the conversation. If you want your position heard, I believe you must also be willing to hear out those who believe different. In this presentation, the word gun and weapon will be used interchangeably to refer to weapons that fire rounds or what some refer to as bullets. Gun control. How can we make America safer? Topics to discuss will be the ban on assault weapons, also known for a large portion as semi-automatic, and what exactly that means. The mind of mass shooters and their weapons, purpose of background checks, getting rid of all the guns, America and their guns, firearm homicide statistics, and lastly, where do we go from here? So first I wanted to talk about this ban on semi-automatic or assault weapons. And basically an assault weapon is a term used to define some types of firearms. The definition varies, but usually includes semi-automatic firearms with detachable magazines and pistol grips. First, I just wanted to clear up some basic misunderstanding people have, including me, on what a semi-automatic is and what it's not. Basically, a semi-automatic means that the round must first be chambered manually before the weapon can be fired, and then the trigger needs to be pulled down each time to release one round. This is different from an automatic, which requires just holding down the trigger to release multiple rounds for as long as the trigger is held down or rounds run out. So an example of that would be machine guns that are used in wartime. We'll hear them when it's being broadcasted on the media, that shoots multiple rounds per second. So another thing I just wanted to go over really quick is the difference between semi-automatics, like most pistols, and alternate options like revolvers. So basically a revolver, there's two types. One is a double action, one's a single action. Basically a double action revolver is similar to a semi-automatic where all you have to do is squeeze down the trigger and it releases one round, but they actually are not considered semi-automatics. You can see a reference after the slideshow for better understanding. A single action revolver is where you have to actually cock the gun and then pull the trigger down to release a round each and every time. Revolvers commonly hold 5 to 8 rounds in a barrel, and pistols generally will hold anywhere from 5 to 10 rounds. So now what about these rifles and shotguns? Similar to pistols and revolvers, these can be semi-automatic or single action, meaning that you need to actually cock it before pulling the trigger each time. The big difference is that in the amount of rounds that a weapon can use. Rifles often come with the option of a 10-round or a 30-round magazine. A magazine, you can see in the picture here, is basically a holder of the rounds that can be attached to the weapon. Another difference is rifles are known to be much more accurate and do more damage than a pistol or revolver. And just to note that it was found that, especially more recently, that the AR-15 semi-automatic rifles are the weapon of choice in many of our deadliest mass shootings. So what about the ban for the AR-15 rifles? First of all, let's talk about what AR stands for. It does not stand for assault rifle, nor does it mean automatic rifle. AR stands for Arma-Light Rifle. The AR-15 rifles are no more powerful than a lot of other hunting rifles. They operate the same, they just look cosmetically different. So other similar rifles include the M&P15, AP4, R25. So the big question is, do we ban assault weapons like AR-15s? Will they actually hinder mass shootings? First thing that we need to do is determine what is classified as an assault weapon, as this definition varies. So banning assault weapons may cause mass shootings to end in less fatalities. This would be assuming the assailant does not have more weapons at their disposal. It can also lead to less fatalities, but only to a degree that the black market for illegal weapons does not grow. Banning assault weapons with certain features may help, such as limiting round size. It may not hinder mass shootings, but might lessen the number of fatalities. The mind of a mass shooter. Most tend to be young males who act alone after carefully planning the event. Forensic investigations show that virtually every one of these attacks is a predatory crime, methodically planned and executed. The traits of mass killers include depression, a fascination with violence, and are usually psychotic or psychopaths. Most spend a great deal of time feeling resentful about real or imagined rejections and ruminating on past humiliations. One study determined that the media focused much more heavily on the shooter than the victims. This individual can view the resulting media attention as a reward for violent acts. Many, if not the majority of mass school shooters, researched and were inspired by past shootings. Mass shooters often carry more than one weapon. One was found with 24. 167 of mass shooters' weapons were obtained legally, and 49 were obtained illegally. 76 were unknown as far as how they were acquired. Many mass shootings in America have one thing in common: the AR-15 rifle. The purpose of background checks and the idea of enforcing stricter background checks will prevent handguns from falling into the wrong hands. This is true, but only if we assume mass shooters won't find other means to get a gun. 1 of every 5 guns used in a crime in LA were committed soon after the crime occurred. This suggests that many legal gun purchasers then sold or gave the gun to an individual who soon after committed a crime. This is known as a straw purchaser. Stricter background checks to prevent guns from falling into the wrong hands is true as well, as long as the assailant has never had a run-in with the law prior and or is weeded out somehow via some type of psychological screening. So let's just get rid of all the guns. If implementing certain restrictions can only lessen mass shootings at some unknown degree, why not ban all guns? Americans and their guns. 30% of all U.S. adults own a gun. Of the 69 who did not, 36% could see owning one in the future. 42% live in a house with a gun. 67% own a gun mainly for protection, 38% mainly for hunting. 60% of U.S. adults believe stricter gun laws will not lead to less mass shootings. America without guns, is it possible? What would happen is we'd have to force or convince 30% of adult Americans to turn over their guns. We'd have to stop illegal guns from entering the U.S. from other countries. The illicit small arms market has been estimated at 10 to 20% of all total global arms trade. So basically 10 to 20% of all guns that are purchased or obtained are done so illegally. 2,000 illegal weapons cross the U.S.-Mexican border per day. We also would need to make sure that we are able to stop somebody from being able to make their own gun. Do legally owned guns save lives? When looking at statistics to help answer this question, I was quite surprised by what I found, so I thought it would be important to list a number of the various reports. Each year, firearms are used more than 80 times more often to protect the lives of citizens than to take lives. Law-abiding citizens use guns to defend themselves against criminals as many as 2.5 million times per year, or about 6,850 times a day. More than 10 million Americans have permits to carry concealed weapons as of 2014, which is up from 4.5 million in 2007. This 146% increase parallels a 22% drop in both murder and violent crime rates during the same period. Using a gun in self-defense is between 60 and 100% more than the number of violent crimes involving firearms. Almost all national survey estimates indicate that defensive gun uses by victims are at least as common as offensive uses by criminals, with estimates of annual uses ranging from about 500 to more than 3 million in the context of about 300,000 violent crimes involving firearms in 2013. I just wanted to share a couple stories of Americans who actually stopped criminals and mass shootings. Florida in 2012, a 70-year-old man stopped a robbery and may have saved lives when he pulled out his gun and scared off robbers who entered a cafe with weapons. In 2013, a shooter opened fire at Prince Middle School in Atlanta, Georgia. However, after wounding only one student, the suspect was disarmed by an armed guard who was stationed at the school. In 2017, a Texas church shooting ended when a man engaged the shooter with his own gun. The shooter then dropped his rifle and tried to escape by car. He died in the car, but it was not clear whether he died after being shot by the resident or whether he killed himself. Let's look at some firearm homicide statistics. Since the early 90s, there had been a drop in homicides. By 2010, the number of deaths dropped to almost half what they were in 1993. On the graph to the right, we see that gun violence has declined as well, with the only non-changing factor being that of suicides. In 2014, 64% of all gun deaths were from suicides. So I'm sure you've heard, as I have, that unemployment rates and poverty usually will mirror the level of violent crimes in a community. I wanted to see if that was true and if we could actually see some of that in the statistics. Looking at the graph on the right, we see a decline in crime starting around 1983. Some studies attribute part of this to the young baby boomers getting older and not being in the high crime age bracket. Looking at the graph on the left, you could see that unemployment also dropped pretty drastically starting around 1983. In early 1983, the recession had ended. Some attribute Reagan's policies for the drop in unemployment. Reagan added almost 16 million jobs during 1981 and 1989. As you could see on the right-hand graph, by the mid-80s there was a slight rise in crime that possibly was due to the rising street market of crack cocaine. During the Clinton era, unemployment and crime continued to decrease. From 2001 to 2010, even though unemployment fluctuated, murder rates remained low. So looking at homicide death rates from 2000 till about now, it looks like they've stayed pretty low since 2000, the homicide deaths as well as overall crime. Possible reasons why: the Brady Act was put into law in 1993, which required federal background checks on firearm purchasers. In 1994, the federal assault weapons ban was enacted, but this expired in 2004, and even after the ban expired, gun violence had stayed pretty steady and low. Unemployment in 2010 began to slowly decrease and was cut in half by 2016. And our poverty rate has stayed steady since 2010, right around 15%. So where do we go from here? We can force gun owners to turn over all firearms and make it illegal to own a firearm. Of course, this would leave only criminals with firearms. We can reinstitute the federal assault weapons ban that expired in 2004, maybe expand it to include newer features or accessories such as the bump stock. We can expand on the Brady Act and make it harder to obtain a firearms permit, maybe allow full disclosure amongst various agencies who as a unit can weed out those potential threats before it's too late. They could look at criminal records, mental health records, maybe require a psychological evaluation to obtain a permit. We can enforce a law that prohibits transferring ownership of weapons from a legal gun owner to one who is not. It's also known as the straw purchaser. We can create a database and allow full disclosure that's shared between local law enforcement, FBI, etc., so they are able to share information about possible threats. Other things we could do is add heavier security at schools, hire armed security, install metal detectors, and emergency lockdown systems where parts of the building can be locked down. We can allow teachers who are willing to learn firearm safety and store a gun in a locked safe in their classroom or another area of the school. Another option came up recently where we can instate a gun violence restraining order where a person's right to own a gun can be temporarily removed if they're found to be a danger to themselves or to others. Thanks for staying tuned. I hope you found this informational and helpful in deciding where you stand on this issue, and that you feel I presented the facts as unbiased as possible. Please comment below on any facts you feel I might have missed that needs to be shared. And remember, if only we fought just as hard to understand as we do disagree, we would be that much wiser and with many more friends.